Do you ever find yourself in those incredibly uncomfortable situations where you want to say no, but you find yourself saying yes, or just not knowing how to say no without coming across like an a-hole? This episode is all about the power of saying no and the art of saying no, something that I find in order to live an authentic life and to be true to who you are, it's so invaluable and important to say no sometimes so you can honor and speak your own truth. So that's what this episode is all about. And I know there's so many situations that we find ourselves in on a daily basis where we feel tempted to say yes to things that actually don't feel authentic and true to us. Whether it is someone asking for your time and attention, maybe they want to pick your brain, they want your expertise, or want you to actually come to them and lend a hand. We've got people who are asking us for money and donations. We've got all sorts of requests that come in on a daily basis, whether from our coworkers or our bosses. We've got our family, our friends, maybe even a potential romantic partner that want us to serve a specific role in their life that maybe we don't want to sign up for. So sometimes saying no to being someone who we don't want to be in the eyes of others can be a challenging thing for us. And then it's also sometimes tough to say no to all the distractions that pop up, all the noise that pops up in our daily lives. Maybe it is your phone or social media, and the importance of saying no to swiping and scrolling down your feed in order to say yes to your greatest priority. So there's so many different opportunities in our daily lives to say no, and oftentimes it's easy to find ourselves saying yes just because that's what seems like the right thing to do. So real quick, the reason why it's so tough to say no is we're actually programmed at a very young age to say yes and to comply. Our parents teach us to be polite and to fit in and to say yes to them, and we're actually punished when we say no. We also fear about the consequences of saying no, and I know socially, and especially for me, that's always been a tough one for me. Back in grade school, wanting to fit in, to be liked, oftentimes I would find myself saying yes to others because I didn't want to be chastised or outcast or feel like I didn't belong. It can be tough to say no sometimes because if we say no to something, maybe we'll miss out on another opportunity or we'll come across as a huge a-hole. But if I've learned anything, saying no over saying yes can be incredibly powerful. And saying no doesn't mean you're a horrible person. In contrary, saying no is incredibly important to your well-being. It's really knowing your value and really having the courage to speak your truth. I find that when I speak my truth, it is empowering for me. I feel good in my own skin and realize that I do have a voice that matters. And I know when I'm selling out on myself by saying yes to someone who I don't actually really mean to say yes to, I'm selling out on myself. I'm probably going to resent myself for it later. And I might not even show up in the way that the person who wants me to show up, the way that they want me to show up for them, because I actually am not really even in it in the first place. Saying no is also really important because it sets boundaries as to what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept with others. And I think saying no is also incredibly powerful because it allows you to prioritize the things in your life that are actually important versus just saying yes to things that aren't important and then really being underwater, maybe being overwhelmed, or really living a life that you feel is expected of you versus the life that you want to live, which is never going to be the formula for happiness and self-acceptance and fulfillment. So saying no in order for a bigger yes, and a yes to you and a yes to your authentic truth is so incredibly powerful and important. There's also what I like to call the no effect. And no effect is oftentimes we make up these stories as to what the consequences will be if we say no to someone, whether they want us to come out to a party or saying no to your boss, which I know can be a little bit more scary and difficult, but oftentimes we think that by saying no, there might be consequences, we might not be liked, we might be passed up for additional opportunities, when the reality is oftentimes the occasional no, standing up for yourself and saying no, isn't going to have a big effect, hence the no effect. The other piece is that oftentimes people will actually respect us more when we have the courage to stand up and speak our truth. So for me, there's a lot of different areas of my life where I find it incredibly challenging to say no. I'd say the top one is really in terms of prioritization. There's so many things that I want to do in my life, whether professionally or personally, and time is a finite resource, as we all know. So sometimes I'll find myself knowing what my top priority is with work. For right now, it is launching Love Bomb, the app that I've been developing, as well as working to continue to bring my Kindfluence workshops and keynotes to organizations, and then, of course, the podcast. And there's so many different tasks and things that I could do within each one of those different things, the podcast, the speaking, and the app, that ensuring that I'm spending my time on the most important things and saying no to maybe some of the low-hanging fruit or some of the things that aren't really important and aren't really urgent are a great way for me to ensure that I'm actually doing the things that are going to be the most fulfilling and impactful in that regard. Other struggles that I have is replying to messages, whether it's to emails or text messages. I'm the kind of person that I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser. I want to be liked. I would love in an ideal world to respond to every single email I get, to every single text I get. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. So instead of feeling that need to respond and maybe prioritizing those responses over something that is actually much more important and urgent, then I find myself really struggling both to say no. So I'm working on giving myself the permission of maybe not responding to someone right away, or maybe not even responding at all if I feel like it's really not that important to me. So being okay with that is definitely an area and an opportunity for growth for me. Because I certainly don't want to come across as an asshole, and I do genuinely want to help as many people as possible. Sometimes, though, I realize that there is a little bit of a push and pull as it comes to that. Another thing is people often ask me if they can come stay at my house. In some events, people are asking if they can stay in my guest room just so they can Airbnb their own place out. And sometimes I'll find myself saying yes just because I don't want to say no, because I want to be a good friend and I want to be the kind of person that's there for my friends. When in the reality is, if I've got a lot going on, maybe some recordings, that I don't want someone staying in my guest room. So powerfully saying no and not putting myself in the position where they're going to keep coming back and asking me to stay in my guest room while they rent out their own place in Venice on Airbnb. So that's just another opportunity for me to just stand in my worth and to say no, because frankly, I just don't need to have that person staying at my house. So there's so many options and opportunities for me to practice saying no and to continue to be better at saying no. And recording this podcast and even thinking about where I have a tough time saying no in my life, the particular circumstances and situations, is really powerful for me. Another one of those situations where it's really tough for me to say no is when someone wants to make plans with me on the spot, or they make a request, they want to come on my podcast and they'll ask me face to face. And it's really uncomfortable for me to say no. So I'm definitely learning the value of just speaking powerfully and speaking my truth and saying no. Another tip that I love to use is I'll buy myself some time so I can decide that I don't have to say maybe no to their face, but can respond later and speak my authentic truth and give them the answer, which is no. Because I've realized that there's a few different options I have anytime I'm saying yes or no to someone. One is I can say yes to something that I don't want to do. That's a definite no from me. And then I can just be so annoyed about it later and throughout the process. The second thing is I can say no to someone and feel guilty about it. Or 3, I can say no and be totally cool with it. I guess I could also say yes, even though I'm not aligned with it, but be fully accepting of it and not feel guilty about it as well. So when to say no, it's always okay to say no to something if you don't feel like doing it. Obviously, though, in the course of a romantic relationship or a workplace dynamic, saying no to your boss, obviously there are some consequences of saying no. So just be aware of the consequence, the real consequence of saying no. But you're certainly able to say no to something if you don't feel like it. Also, if you don't have time, say no. Be sure to prioritize the things that are most important to you. Oftentimes, other people don't know what we're up to, so they'll make a request not knowing the full, scope of things that we've got going on in our lives. So you can certainly say no if you don't feel like there's enough time. You can also say no if the request legitimately makes you feel uncomfortable. That is totally cool as well. You can say no if people are trying to get you to spend money and to buy something. And you can always prioritize your healthcare. If you're tired and you don't want to go out with friends, just say, I'm choosing to take a me night and to listen to my body and relax. That is totally cool too. I know sometimes when we look about the way we spend our time that we wouldn't think that self-care and taking care of ourselves and maybe staying home and relaxing is a good excuse. It absolutely is a good excuse, because in order to show up, as our true selves and, to be our best and to be happy and joyful, we also need to get sleep and rest and take care of ourselves. So you can certainly say no in order to take care of yourself. So saying no, I think a great thing to do is just to literally listen to your body. And if you have like a strong inclination within you, in your body to say no, go ahead and say it. And if you really don't know, then perhaps don't make a decision right there in that moment. Also, be selfish. Feel free to be selfish. Ultimately, you know how making a decision is going to make you feel. So feel free to be selfish. Know the opportunity cost of saying yes versus saying no. Oftentimes when we're giving away our time and our energy, that if we're saying yes to giving, away our next 2 hours, that's going to impact the way that we spend the rest of our day. And if you've got a lot to do and a lot of things that you want to prioritize outside of the request, then be sure to know what the opportunity cost is in the event that you are going to say yes or no. Feel free to set boundaries. That's powerful, as I mentioned earlier. I'd encourage you to maybe reconsider taking freebies, because when we accept freebies, we naturally want to reciprocate. That's kind of part of why freebies are being offered to us in the first place. So I think being aware of the freebies that are presented to you and not saying no so you don't feel obligated to give back is a great way of setting a boundary. And then don't say yes just because everybody else is saying yes. If everyone's going to jump off a cliff, are you going to jump off a cliff? So feel free to say no if even if everybody else around you is saying yes. You will probably feel even better about yourself afterwards for standing powerfully in saying no in a situation where the easy thing to do would be to say yes. Also, remember that your personal worth does not depend on what other people think of you. It really is standing up for yourself and showing up for yourself. So feel free to say no just for your own well-being and your own self-acceptance and honoring yourself. So how to literally say no. So I've got a little script for you and some tips. So here are a few. Number one is be direct in saying no. Simply say no. Don't beat around the bush. You don't have to offer an excuse or a story. That kind of seems soft. But if you stand powerfully and say no without explaining, that's a great way for the message to actually land and not open up the door for a negotiation or for someone to keep coming back and kind of being pushy. Warren Buffett actually said that we need to learn to give the slow yes and to say no quickly. Never lie. I'm a big fan of authenticity. Lying is going to be a great way to feel guilty later. So I know that can feel like the easy thing to do, to lie to your boss, to lie to somebody when they're asking for your time. Don't lie. Lying doesn't serve anyone. Simply say no. One of the things that I love to do, as I alluded to earlier, is that I like to buy time. If someone is telling me face to face they want to go grab coffee and I'm thinking to myself, no, I just don't feel like going to grab coffee with you, I'll usually say, send me an email. So then they got to send me an email and then I can choose how to respond. With that said, though, that if you're buying yourself the time, you're also probably going to be thinking about it more versus just saying no and being done with it. Another thing that I always encourage is instead of saying no, maybe perhaps there's a way of saying yes conditionally. So instead of saying no, maybe saying yes if. So I think that saying yes if is a great way to, instead of just saying no, to imagine a scenario that you could say yes, but it would maybe also help you out. So if you are, for example, limited with time in a given afternoon, and someone asks you for help, maybe it's moving, you can say, I've got a lot going on, but yes, I can help you move if once we're done moving, you can come over and you can help me with something that I need help with. So yes, if is a powerful way to kind of expand your perspective and maybe look at this request as an opportunity for you to maybe get support in an area that's independent of the request that you're getting from the other person, but also fulfilling in a way that's going to support you as well. Also, always be kind and thank the people for asking. I know when someone asks me for my time, I choose to look at it as an honor. I guess they could have asked anyone, but I think letting people know that they're heard is a great way to simply show you care. So even when you say no, you're not going to come across as an asshole. So here is a quick little script as to how you can say no and show you care. And this is out of my Kindfluence playbook. The 3 main pillars of Kindfluence is to be caring, to be honest, and to be giving. And you can still be caring, honest, and giving with saying no. So here is the Kindfluence script as to how to say no. So when someone asks you for your time, for your money, simply acknowledge them. Let them know that you hear them and you understand that they've got a problem or they've got a request. Be supportive. Acknowledge that you hear what they're asking you for. That's the first step. The second step is to say no. You can simply say no. You can say no because, and I encourage you during this part to set a boundary. If you never want this person to call you again, simply say, hey, I understand you're doing your job, but I do not like getting phone calls from telemarketers. Please put me on the do not disturb list. We've also got, after you acknowledge and you say no, I think a great thing to do is to give an alternative offer if you feel inclined. I'd say that this is optional, but let's say someone asks you for, your help this afternoon and you say, I'd love to help you out with moving, but I'm not available this afternoon. How about tomorrow? So that's another way to offer the alternative. And then the last step is to offer a kind wish to the person. So just to be really supportive. So kind of when you distill it all together, I always acknowledge someone for coming to me with a request. Then I'll say no if that feels like my truth. If I feel like offering an alternative solution, I will. If not, I'll just say, best of luck with whatever it is. Or if someone wants me to go to a social obligation, I'll say, oh, wow, that sounds really fun. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm not going to be able to make it tonight, but have an absolutely amazing time and keep me in mind for opportunities like this in the future. So I think there's definitely a way to say no in a way that shows you care without coming across as an a-hole or being unappreciative. Obviously, it can be a lot more challenging to say no when you are in the work environment or in a relationship. So I think in those specific situations where you're saying no, maybe to your boss or maybe to your spouse, is when you're doing that acknowledging piece, when they're coming to you with the request, that reiterating what the request is, acknowledging what your commitment is to the vision. So for example, if your boss comes to you with additional work that they want to put on your plate, to say, thank you so much for approaching me with this opportunity. I'm so committed to getting the absolute best job done and doing excellent work. And I'm committed to just the vision of what we're building. But I feel like my plate is full right now. I've got, X, Y, and Z. You're specifically saying, what else you've got on your plate without complaining about it. And then maybe offering the alternative again, saying to your boss, well, if you want me to work on this new project, should I prioritize that over some of the other projects that maybe they've already given you, so you can create a kind of yes if scenario. And then of course, just following it up with a thank you and perhaps a wish. So those are some ways to say no. I hope that was beneficial. I know that saying no can be a tricky scenario. There'll always be situations where we find ourselves having a tough time saying no, especially when we feel like there's a consequence and an effect that could be damaging to your relationship. But what I have personally found is that saying no is a practice, and it does continue to get easier with practice over time. So I encourage you to practice it. And then just be just to be kind of knowledgeable about the situations in your life where you find it tough to say no, and to just allow yourself to practice maybe journaling some different scenarios that you could do next time you find yourself in that situation, versus just continuing to find yourself in that situation and struggling with it every single time. So that is this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I encourage you to powerfully choose yes for yourself, and I give you complete permission to say no to anything that feels out of alignment for you. And just wishing you an absolute beautiful week. So this is Mark Shapiro signing off from episode 208 of Are You Being Real?